So good afternoon. My name is Neil Sutton. I'm the editor of the security publications at Annex Business Media. I thought this would be a good time to check in with some security and emergency management professionals about what we've learned in roughly the first month of the pandemic and everybody working from home. So we're recording this on March the 14th, and it was probably 4 to 5 weeks ago today that people in this country really started to understand that our lives were going to change. So before I get to questions, I'll just do some quick introductions. I am joined by Bill Needles, who's an emergency management and security professional in the Toronto area and a former Toronto police superintendent. Jason Reed, who's a senior advisor of fire and emergency management for National Life Safety Group, and Ken Hogart, who's the president of Universal Training Solutions. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me today.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Maybe Jason, you can get us started. So, as I mentioned in our introduction, we're about a month into this. What are some of the big takeaways we've had in the last 3 or 4 weeks since the economy started to shut down and the majority of people are working from home now?
I think from a security perspective, emergency management perspective, you've got facilities that are either shut down or limited operations or full operations. So for example, an industrial workplace is working as it should, and for example, bear with me, I apologize. I just got, okay. So listen, from a security perspective and emergency management perspective, my biggest takeaway and my focal point right now in working with clients has been routine risk management is no longer routine. The implications of COVID-19 at every single facility, whether it's a residential high-rise, a commercial high-rise, an industrial facility, or an office tower. Quite simply, routine emergencies are no longer routine because they've created new risks and liabilities. And those risks and liabilities are different through the lens of security responders, physical security practitioners within your workplace, as well as the occupants within your building. I think that's the most significant change that's impacting the security industry right now.
Thanks, Jason. Ken, same question, please.
I think that one of the things this has done is helped us try to establish who and what employees can effectively work from home. So that's been a big game changer, I think. And I have also noticed it's quite challenging for the general public and employees to follow government directives, company policy, and good practices or best practices. It's good we get some risk management to put things down on paper and have a plan, but can that plan be executed? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we've come across over the past month is finding out how effective they are from being paper to actually implementation.
Bill, what do you think?
Well, not going too far down the road into any of your other questions, but I see now that a lot of the private sector, public sector partnerships that were talked about before this thing started may or may not be there now. You have the relationships between the private security force that are, as Jason said, looking after apartments, condos, industrial, shopping malls, all those complexes. Now, how are they interacting on the security front and the emergency management front with our first responders? First responders aren't as quick to get there now as they were even then. The fire service is somewhat taking a seat back, not entering until they have a sure assessment of the thing. They're not racing to these calls anymore. So it puts the security force that's on premise to a higher degree of risk and a higher degree of vulnerability and a higher degree of expectations as we go forward down the road into some of these things. And now, speaking about the pandemic plans and all of the plans that were just spoken to by Ken, I think we're finding now, and we will probably find when we come out of this thing, that they were just nothing more than a tick box in someone's list of plans that needed to be done. They weren't exercised, they weren't trained, they weren't planned for, they were on a shelf, and they were difficult to now put into play. But a month in, I think a lot of them have come through the problems and they're starting to rectify it.
Okay. So one of the big things that we've touched on is the number of vacant commercial buildings or near vacant commercial buildings that are operating with a skeleton crew, with a minimum of employees, sometimes practically zero. what can companies do to protect their interests with their commercial property right now, to safeguard their assets and their property under what are, you know, completely unprecedented conditions? Jason, what do you think?
Listen, as Bill mentioned, security's got a vital role, and I think it's even more important and more vital right now. If I had to suggest what my documented due diligence would be, whether my facility is occupied or not, I would increase security. And when I say increase security, I'm not suggesting there's additional bodies. I'm suggesting that we do things wisely and effectively while maintaining social distancing and use the tools that we have available to us. For example, you know, a concierge at an apartment building or a condo, or a security guard at the front desk of a workplace has at his or her disposal a plethora of keyboards and camera systems. Now, what I've seen is a reduction of tasks being assigned to security because they're focusing on their core responsibilities. They're getting back to basics, which I really agree with. But I think where the opportunity to enhance security is, because you have limited travel around your building, limited occupants walking around your building, limited vehicles driving around your building. Those were all previously eyes and ears that would report wrongdoing. And in essence, extend your security program by having just the average person report things. All of that is gone. So in the eyes of due diligence, my view is I've got somebody at a desk, and if that person's not been assigned a role to play actively, they should be pulling up camera number one, rotating it 360 degrees, moving up from the top level of the room into the bottom of the room, and utilizing that camera system to complete those virtual patrols. I can't stress that enough. Your security has been decreased based on just the general population numbers decreasing within your building and in your community.
Thank you, Jason. Ken, what do you think about this?
I would echo both Bill and Jason's comments about the security playing a different role now. I think that you know, we have to establish, you know, the routine patrols that maybe weren't routine before, and training staff to observe alternative potential concerns other than just security and crime. Now we're talking more about things like you know, life safety issues such as doors, locks, windows, landscaping, leaks, loss of balance concerns, you know, trips, falls, things like that. And what are we looking for? I think the other side from a trainer's perspective is getting people to be overly concerned with that social distancing side of things. And although conflict management and communication skills were vital before, they're even more vital now. We want to keep that distance. We want to avoid going hands-on. We want to be able to use our communication skills to establish things to the best of our ability and to control the situation. But I think that establishing these patrols, and I would echo Jason's comments about increasing security, you're the front line now, and you don't have the eyes and ears of the most policies of see something, say something. Now it's basically, you know, working from the security perspective alone. I think another option or another thing is the possibility of now looking at renovations and redesign facilities entrances in order to better adapt for possible isolations and personal hygiene practices. Those kind of things is a good opportunity during this time. How do we change things in the future to better be prepared for anything like this, and just general health of our staff and security and guests?
Thank you, Ken. Bill, before we move on to another topic, what do you think, especially for commercial businesses at a time like this when they're operating with almost vacant buildings in some cases with limited staff?
Well, without going through what Jason and Ken said, I totally agree with what they both did say. I think the important role now that the systems check, they have to check all their security alarms, all their cameras, make sure they're tip-top shape, and be able to securely walk around that building and in combination with the CCTV camera process, making sure all the doors are safe and secure and locked. But also what Ken said I liked was that you can now, when you start to look back into coming into business, maybe in stages, is to limit the access to your buildings, maybe reduce the number of exits and entrances that even the staff can come in, to make sure that they're coming through a secure entrance, so that now your building is far more secure, because now you don't have all the eyes and ears. You need your own people to look out for that. and there's probably not going to be much for the police patrols in the area because they're reduced numbers now, or even more than they were before. And now knowing that there's not much activity in those industrial areas, they're not necessarily going through there with as much vim and vigor as there was before. But that doesn't mean the bad guys are not going through there fully accessible. They know what's going on, and they're certainly out to take full advantage, to find the weaknesses, to find that company doesn't have their cameras working, to find the company that's alarm system isn't working. They'll find it and they'll exploit it.
Thanks, Bill. So maybe I'll go back to you for this one, Bill. You mentioned that in some cases, maybe a company's or organization's pandemic plan, was a binder on a shelf with some check boxes on it. And now that we're being tested by a very real situation, maybe people might have occasion to go back and look at those, review those just in case, if this comes up in the years ahead or it flares up again under the current pandemic. How do you think people should be adjusting their pandemic plans going forward, Bill?
Well, I think we need to start from square one. I think a lot of them were, started maybe in SARS, and maybe they had another little touch up after H1N1 in 2009. But probably from now till here, this one hit so fast and so hard. I don't think a lot of opportunity was taken. A lot of emergency planning was done to do more than make a pandemic plan that's on a shelf, a tick box, and then to that degree, only an overview of what they might think as part of their business continuity plan. The full business continuity plan certainly takes into account now and where it goes and how and who, what jobs are important, what are critical, employees, what aren't. Trying to tell the president he's not critical when someone at the bottom line, the security guard, is critical. Those issues need to be discussed prior to. Now, coming out of this, the recovery of some of the companies is going to be a challenge. Some of them are going to recover faster than others. Some of them aren't going to recover. Let's be frank. I think we all agree that a lot of companies are not going to survive this. So coming out of this, it's now full. Do they need to get ready for phase 2 and redo their pandemic plan? Do they have anyone that's capable of doing it? Or do they have to outsource that? And or do they now need to look at their business continuity plans and even their emergency plans? A lot of those things that were probably thought by risk managers as something we don't necessarily need to look at are now something they may need to be looking at because they're finding themselves vulnerable because some of the things that are done in those kinds of plans aren't being done or weren't being done to the satisfaction of whether, when Ken's talking about training and all of those things need to be done. Exercises, you can't write a plan without exercising it and practicing it. And we know that the security components of what a physical security staff is transient in a lot of cases, and they come and go, and that training needs to be ongoing.
Thank you, Bill. Ken, what are your thoughts about how we should be looking at pandemic plans and emergency plans going forward, just based on the lessons we've all accumulated in the last few weeks?
I think that Jason hit a really good point when I saw him at a conference about a month ago, and he started talking about teaching his family how to have better personal hygiene. And I think that is probably the biggest takeaway for a lot of people in general. How do we conduct ourselves with personal hygiene, and how are we doing that with hand washing and coughing, sneezing, all those kind of things, and that's going to change things a lot. And I think that that's going to become more commonplace going forward. And we talked about redesign. You're taking that opportunity to possibly redesign facilities to be more secure from not just crimes, but now how do we protect ourselves against something like the virus, the COVID-19 in particular. There was years we used to have, glass barriers or plexiglass barriers up in order for security reasons, and they were taken down for customer service reasons. And now we see them going back up even in our grocery stores because it's protecting against another danger. And I think those things are going to start to be re-implemented from a various different perspective. Is it going to be a combination of some sort of a clear barrier that is going to give us that protection from both crime and from airborne pathogens?
Thank you, Ken. Jason, what are your thoughts about pandemic plans? And something that Ken mentioned is that you might have revised your approach or had some tips, before this all started. What are your thoughts now?
I think the pandemic plan and the emergency management plans, response plans, I think the focal point really has been that security has stepped up at every facility, whether it's a condominium, whether it's an industrial workplace. Security really has shown a leadership role throughout the last 4 weeks. I think my only caveat to that would be is lessons learned that I've been a part of in managing some of these incidents in the past with respect to documentation. For example, one of the most common interactions I've had in the last 7 days is, you're speaking with potential clients or leaders within the community, and yep, we've got that, we're doing that. And that tends to be the common response by the majority of people. But when you lift just one rock, and I'm not suggesting lifting 9 rocks, I'm suggesting lifting one rock. If you can't prove you're doing that, it means you're not doing it. And that is vitally important. For example, your security operations command center. We're all cleaning shared equipment, mice or mouses, keyboards, punch-in clocks, telephones, shared equipment. Where I believe that we need to focus now more on is providing evidence of that cleaning so that 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the road, you're able to access that documentation and create a defendable platform. To me, that's vital because we are doing these things, but lesson learned after lesson learned is that we lack the documentation. Prime example. Ottawa, the police announced that they've seen a 70% increase in break and enters in the last 4 weeks. As Bill had mentioned, these things are going to happen. So what rock should I be lifting? The simple rock is I should make sure my guards at night go out and do an exterior lighting on it. To me, that's getting back to basics and making sure our core functions are working so that we can expand on our pandemic plan, so that we can take a look at other issues. Because quite often, if that lighting is not working on the outside of your building, well, from SEPTED principles, you've got a decrease in protection. From the decrease of travel and people walking and driving around your building, you've got a decrease in eyes. So I think that documentation is very, very important when we talk about when we did it and what did we do. For example, another example is, we're doing lots of cleaning in the lobby and the main entrance of our building, protecting our visitors and our security teams. What did you tell your security teams to clean? Because as an example, I want to make sure we're cleaning the phones, the mouse, this, and we're doing that at intervals at 4 hours a day. Most workplaces are probably only doing it twice a day, and I think we can tend to give them a false sense of security, if you will, or cleanliness or disinfectedness. So I think those are the types of rocks that I want to look at, and it allows us to get back to basics, because those basics are the ones that are going to bite us in the butt.
Bill, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I just thought on further to that, as I spoke to a client and I suggested that it would be a valuable potential idea for them to turn their operational center into an EOC, Emergency Operations Center. They have different venues, different sites for their guards, different for their security people, for the security posture. That it's a good idea to keep those records, as Jason said. IMS forms would be a good way, but I mean, you need that kind of training to probably venture into that. But you need to capture that for when the after action report gets done, or someone takes a challenge to your company and says, you didn't supply me with enough PPE, so I'm suing you now because I caught this or that. And now you can say, I have the records to say our team made this many calls, this many inquiries, bought this, and this, and here's all the documents to say we did all we could in that area of buying PPE. And that counterbalances that risk to your company to say, now we've got the records to verify. It may not be perfect, but we have records to verify, other than going, hey, George, did you remember when we called so-and-so to get masks? And what did they say? Well, I don't remember what they said. I was not paying attention that day. It's just those kinds of things that records can keep a company from losing contact with the communications piece, and then going forward to any litigation or risk that they may face.
Thanks, Bill. Maybe Ken, I'll give you the last word before we log off. How does this affect us from a training perspective going forward? I mean, this has been a real test of a lot of people's plans, and they've learned a lot, and probably developed new strategies that they can implement now and in the future. But what's your thought on how we can train people to better prepare and respond to events like this?
I'm going to echo what Bill was saying with regards to the emergency management plans and the tick boxes. For me as a trainer, we are hoping that we are training people so they can be better in skill development and be prepared for the job. However, there are some organizations that do view things as checking that box. And if our emergency management plan and our training does not sync, then that becomes a problem. And my hope is that senior management and the C-suites will now take a better understanding of the value of drills, training, simulation exercises, tabletops, all of those things to make sure that we're not just checking boxes, that we're actually ready to be able to be prepared for emergencies. And from a training perspective, the hands-on stuff, we have put all of that on hold because of the emergency state we're in. However, academically and online, we can do small portions of that, but that still does not give security in particular the skills they need to effectively make an arrest or deal with protection of things. However, communication skills, de-escalation skills, all of that can still be practiced, and we're working on developing some different aspects of online training for that.
Okay, thank you, Ken. So thank you, Jason, Ken, and Bill, for joining me today. Thank you for sharing your expertise. Be safe, be well, and we appreciate your time today.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Good day, gentlemen.